The boroughs are New York City. The burbs are everywhere else. Real estate is the ultimate game of risk and reward. It's the biggest investment most people ever make. Fortunes are made over a lifetime and lost in a day. And we're not playing with monopoly money. How do you stay ahead? Who's buying? Who's selling? And why? What do they know? We want the truth. You need an edge. Boroughs and Burbs is your secret weapon, giving you the insider knowledge and strategies you need to succeed in the high-stakes world of real estate. From Palm Beach to Palm Springs, Manhattan to Malibu, we press the experts to expose the pain, find the deals, and occasionally predict the future. That's Boroughs and Burbs, Thursdays, 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific. Because everyone can make money in real estate.
Welcome, everybody. Boroughs and Burbs, number 198, season 5. Retiring quietly? Not anymore. We wrestled with the title of this show. And, I at first thought, well, I think it's going to be mostly about the phenomenon of private equity healthcare roll-ups. And I thought, that's kind of boring and it's kind of limited, right? Right, Roberto? We can do better. So today we have two very special guests. We have Ryan Fazio, who is our Connecticut senator, and he's going to talk to us about policy and some of the bills being introduced to combat roll-ups. And so we're going to get into policy decisions a bit, but we also have Russell Barksdale, CEO of Waveny LifeCare Network, who's an operator, one of the larger operators in the state of nursing homes, home health care, Alzheimer's care, etc. So we're going to get an operator's perspective and we're going to get a policy perspective. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome. And Russell is one of our returning champions, by the way.
That's right. That's right. All right. I'll do a few housekeeping things. You're going to find us at boroughsandburbs.com. And I want to thank Grace Farms. You'll find them at gracefarms.org. And we love Grace Farms. And you can support them by going to their events, checking out their calendar, and checking out their tea and coffee. I'm John Engel. You'll find me at theengelteam.com. Roberto, you'll find him at robertocabrera.com or at the BHS USA website. Russ, oh, I had this up. I had it up there. There he is. Barksdale, Chief Executive since, 2018. And there's a good-looking picture of Russ Barksdale. Yep, there I had it. Ryan, you're going to find Ryan at the Connecticut CT Senate Republicans. And there's a good-looking picture of Ryan. But more recently, as in, last week, Ryan, he announced he is a candidate for governor. And so we may hear a little bit more about that during the hour. And without any further ado, let's get into it. Hello, Russell. Hello, Ryan.
Thanks for having us.
I did a little bit of research on this show, thinking, well, why are we talking about this because this is a pressing issue. And what I found was 24.5% of Connecticut is over the age of 65. And that's a number that's growing more than just about every other state and growing faster than Florida. And I was surprised to see it. I mean, Russell's been warning me for years about the silver tsunami and that the nation is getting older, but I didn't realize that Connecticut's getting older faster. And I started to think, well, I know that hospitals have had a tough time for the last few years, and we've lost a few hospitals. And so I started digging into this, and I found that of the 195 estimated licensed nursing care facilities in the state of Connecticut, 195, we lost about 15 in the last 4 years. So we've got an aging population, and we have fewer hospitals and nursing care facilities to handle them. And with that as a backdrop of bad news, Ryan, what are we doing about that up in Hartford?
Well, not enough, clearly. This is an important issue. It's important that there's access. It's important that there's affordability to all these different services. And We want it to be easier and more affordable for people to age in place here in Connecticut, to retire here in Connecticut. There are, I think, many different policy levers, generally speaking, that could make it easier um, for care to be accessible to our seniors. For instance, we have some of the highest licensing fees for nursing staff in Connecticut. Could be hundreds of dollars per year for people in the healthcare professions to be licensed for the right to work in Connecticut. It could be difficult for nursing and other healthcare professionals who want to come work in Connecticut to get their licenses recognized here. I think that both of those issues could be easily addressed with the right change and reform. We could cut the licensing fees for healthcare workers to something below average or minimal. We should be rolling out the red carpet for people coming to work here in Connecticut. We could recognize, provide reciprocity for healthcare workers' licenses when they're from other states. So it's easier for people to move and work here in Connecticut and provide services here in Connecticut, and for places like Waveny to hire healthcare professionals. And on the healthcare provider front, we should also be making it easier for people to expand care, to have more beds, to buy more machinery and equipment. So we need to reform our certificate of need laws here in Connecticut. There's studies done that show that if a healthcare provider who is licensed, who is up to code, wants to expand care in any dimension across healthcare, that it could take on average about 300 days for them to get approval from the state government for something called a certificate of need. Certificate of need it's above and beyond the health code, the other basic codes. It's basically a permission slip from the state government to change provision of care. We should make it much easier for good healthcare providers to expand care. That'll improve access and improve affordability in the state. I think there's a lot more we can do in Connecticut to improve access and make it easier for people to age in place.
Is this a little bit about competing with neighboring states for this type of care, these funds? For example, you need to be more attractive than Pennsylvania, than New Jersey, than Massachusetts.
I think it's a little bit about competing, and it's also a little bit about just being the best we can be. I mean, no one's doing this to us. The mistakes of policy are not inflicted by other states. They're self-imposed. And but you're absolutely right that in a country with 50 states and 330 million people, where people can freely travel and move anywhere, it makes it that much more important that we get the policy right, that we get the economics right. And that's what we're seeing all across the country, especially post-COVID, that people have become more mobile. So we're getting millions upon millions of internal migration within the United States, where people go to places that are more affordable, where there are better amenities, and so on. So I think these questions of state policy, I know a lot of the news focuses on national policy, but the questions of state policy become more, not less important in the modern day and age, where in a post-COVID world, people are becoming more mobile and more sensitive to different state policies and affordability and so on.
Russ.
Yeah, I'll
What's the
just
big-
add to that. And Ryan and I've had great conversations over the years. He's been a big supporter of looking at affordability, if you will, from state income tax to utility cost. He has really driven some of this, and I appreciate his efforts as well as others. You also have moratoriums. He talks about certificate of public need. You also have moratoriums that are placed upon expansion, and certainly right now, skilled nursing has a moratorium in terms of adding additional beds. So the state is actually trying to contract there. I would also say, New York, and I always want to bring Roberto into this discussion, is New York is among the states where older residents are more often or more frequent ready to leave the state because of the cost and because of the taxes and things of that nature. Connecticut provides, as we were talking about, some out-migration, provides a lower cost and millage rate and things of that nature, and a higher standard of care for someone that's on a fixed income, if you will. So that becomes very important. We also are seeing in Connecticut that over 30% of people over the age of 65 are still in the workforce. And some of them are looking to downsize. They don't have options to downsize or affordable options to do so. So we look at, and we always talk about 830G, and we also talk about workforce housing and things of that nature. But I think the state can play a larger role in coming in and helping nonprofit organizations and other developers to find affordable senior housing. And that affordable senior housing can be different, for each county and for each region. We still have issues related to not, being landlocked. And I think the state could come in and provide some seed money in helping in doing that. And that would open up some of these homes so that Roberto and John and others can bring an in-migration in of those families that are looking for Connecticut and other areas to migrate to because of the schools and because of the community and into New York as well. So it's finding those alternatives and finding a way to make it affordable for people that have fixed incomes. And the last point I would make is we need the people to take care of them. So we started, Ryan knows this very well, and so does John. We started an Earn to Learn program through a nursing school, and we opened it up during COVID. And we just graduated our 200th student. And you could use funds for that kind of program that it helps the individuals go from certificate CNAs to LPNs to RNs, and I think that's a great pathway of learning. So it really is a macroeconomic system, if you will, and seniors are starting to become more vocal, I think, and becoming a larger voter base. And I think they need to be part of that policy discussion. And I think it is time for that.
I've got so many questions. So one, I want to understand the economics of running nursing homes, especially in light of the fact that much has been made that private equity firms are buying up nursing homes. And one of the things I learned from Russ is that one of the least profitable parts of the business is home health care. So that's probably if a private equity firm were to buy Waveny LifeCare, they would stop that because it's one of the less profitable parts of the business. And yet how many people do you serve in the home? And is it a preference for many of them that they continue to live in the home? And especially in an area like Fairfield County where affordable housing is so difficult, it's not like we have affordable options in the area to move seniors out of their homes and put them in senior oriented facilities. We don't have enough of them. So can you talk about the home health care piece of this and where it fits in and why you've got 4 Senate bills talking about the danger of basically handing the keys over to private equity?
It's
Also, Russ, just real quick, regarding that home care, I'm just curious, does that skew towards the more wealthy or to the less fortunate, or is it, evenly dispersed?
It's a great question. You have to look at home care in 2 regions. You have to look at it as what we could consider custodial care, which is private pay business that you have. That skews towards the wealthy that can afford it. Then you have to look at someone that just had an acute care episode in a hospital and they need rehab, and maybe they're in for a 90-day period of skilled nursing, occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, so they can become independent. Look, everyone wants to age in place. Everyone wants to age at home. They may want to downsize, but at the end of the day, they don't want to be in an institution. They want to be home. And for the last 4 years, our federal government has cut Medicare reimbursement for home care because there are some bad actors that are in there, private equity firms and others for profits that have really taken advantage. And the federal government has really cut in order to reduce that incentive for private equity firms to go into that market. So as a nonprofit, because we want to be, our mission is to provide that continuum of care, we still believe that we need to be in the home care. And today, we're taking care of over 300 people in their home, just in our region of Connecticut that we're discussing now. And probably another 60 people that are on hospice, another 100 people that are on telemedicine that are just being monitored, all allowing them to remain independent and remain home. Most of them would want to downsize if there's a cost-effective alternative. Most would want to take the equity out of their home if they could. But I think what John opened up with is absolutely true. The outmigration that we used to see, people going to Naples and Palm Beach and whatever, from Connecticut, from New York, that's not happening. You're seeing those individuals wanting to stay within the communities that they built, either because of their friends and neighbors, but also because of family.
Ryan, what do you think? I mean, I'm hearing two things. The St. Joseph Center in Trumbull just closed 269 beds. And when asked, they said, well, we ran into some difficulty with our state inspections and we couldn't get the waivers we wanted. So we just couldn't make it work and we folded the facility. But it's not just 269 beds, it's the ability of such an organization like St. Joseph's, like Waveny, to reach out into the community and provide services in the home. So it's potentially 1,000 people or 2,000 people that were affected. What can the state be doing to make it easier for a St. Joseph's Center in Trumbull to stay in business?
I think the state regulatory bodies are a mess in several different directions. I think the Office of Health Strategies, for instance, which administers Certificate of Need, has seen turnover, is a nice way to put it. There's a scandal involving the head of that agency who has since left. Their budget is tens of millions of dollars, and yet, as Russ said, they're primarily focused on making it harder for healthcare providers to expand. The state regulatory bodies need to be flexible and work with the providers in a environment that is becoming more difficult to operate in many cases. We also can kind of loosen some of the constraints on the industry by making it easier to age in place at home, by reducing costs for people on fixed incomes and retirees generally, including things like energy costs and property taxes, which are more sensitive cost to seniors, to retirees in particular, because they're cash out the door when there isn't income coming in and they're relying on their savings. So I would say that there are very micro-focused reforms and improvements that need to be made on the healthcare space and home care. And then there are broader questions about making it easier to retire here in Connecticut.
I pulled up this, and maybe it may surprise you, it surprised me. Where are all the old people in Connecticut? And when down here at this article, it gave me a color-coded map. And you see that the Fairfield County, from Bridgeport all the way to Greenwich, is not that many seniors. Where they're going is in the northwest corner of the state, and they're going to the eastern edge of the state. And it occurred to me that a lot of those people are going there because of affordability, not because we're providing nursing care facilities and services for them in those areas. Do either of you want to comment on this map and sort of some of the trends that we're seeing?
Well, I think if you look at that section of Connecticut, you're also finding people that are just crossing into Connecticut, right? Because they're looking at state income tax levels of New York versus Connecticut, and they're saying that within a 10 or 15-minute relocation, I could be in a lower cost state. But yes, to your point, if you're looking at individuals who are just cost shopping. They're trying to find the lower cost alternative without relocating. Then those are the areas in the pockets that you're going to see. I do not see, our constituents, the people that we take care of, which is about 1,000 patients a day. I do not see them wanting to retire to the north. I see some of them having second homes in Maine and Vermont, but they still want to keep a primary home within Fairfield County and Southwest Connecticut for all the reasons that we discussed earlier.
But we talked about, waiting lists and the lack of supply of these services. And to me, it's very simply comes down to it's a supply demand situation. So the prices are just going to continue, and where the wealthy can afford to do, there's a place here in New York, I think it's called the Apsley. It's supposed to be a very, very nice place, extremely expensive, but how many people, those are for the few, not for the many. So how does the industry expand itself to have
If
more
you can't get
supply?
into the Apsley, then you expect I'll stay home and have the Apsley come to me. That's what I hear Ryan and Russell saying, is that we have to provide for a 57% growth in Connecticut's over 65 population by 2040. 57% growth. We can't possibly build enough new nursing homes. The only way to take care of John Engel in 2040 or Roberto Cabrera in 2040 is probably through technology and in their home or in a downsized home, right? Am I right, Russell?
Well, I will speak firsthand. I'm a father of 5 sons and a grandfather of 2 sons. And when those 5 sons left the house, and I lived on a 26-acre horse farm in 8 bedrooms, I first figured out that I did not have enough hands to take care of this property and everything, and I wanted to downsize. And so I followed my children. So my children, we came from up north. My children married and moved back into the area, and so I followed my kids. And so you're going to see more and more of that. We see it now. We see people that live in Florida for 6 months and a day, and if they have to have a hip replacement, they're calling us to make sure that we have a bed available for them so they can rehab closer to their children. So that is what you're going to see, and I think that when you're looking at the forecast, you're looking at the aging population, you're looking at the outmigration starting to cut back as much as they are. Those are the factors that are going into those decisions. And I look at you, John, and your children and Roberto. At some point in time, you're going to want to downsize, but still stay within the community that you've helped build. And we need to look ahead to make sure that we have a place for Roberto and John Engel to still be a part of the community and still have access to resources, but not have to move to the far northwest of Connecticut or an isolated area where they do not have, the support system they enjoy now. So yeah, so Ryan is on top of his game. I mean, it starts at COPN. It starts with moratoriums and looking that way. It also talks about the state coming in and helping with the Earn to Learn program for nurses, because we're going to, if the aging population is going to grow that large, the demand for nurses and therapists are going to be there. And they have a great we have, as a state, looking forward, we have a great opportunity with the right policy and the right providers. And you talk about the partnerships that can be joined. Looking at Cleveland projects and others that have been successful in having the public-private partnership. That's how we started telemedicine program, if you recall, John, and how successful it was. In the same way that you start these other service lines in finding housing that still gives them ample space, but they can move out of that 4 to 8 bedroom house that they currently live in.
Ryan, how is this different policy-wise from, say, affordable housing? I would say that the 140 towns in Connecticut, 160, how many towns do we have in Connecticut?
169.
Okay, 169 towns in Connecticut
That's a
all
trivia question I have to know if I run for governor.
they all point at Hartford and say, "Leave me alone. Don't mess with my zoning. Don't tell me what to do when it comes to affordable housing." There's a lot of resistance towards state control, but it occurs to me that in that everything we've been talking about, the towns, the municipalities really can't take care of this problem. This is and the federal government is cutting Medicare. So this really is a state problem, and it doesn't have to be a town versus state um, conflict. So how is this different from our ordinary problems of affordable housing?
Well, I think it's part of it. You know, as you well know, the affordable housing policies and proposed reforms of the state have been very focused on what I would characterize, I hope not in an unfair way, but I think there is truth to it, kind of a one size fits all prescription. You know, it very much um, incentivizes more large scale development of apartment buildings and working around local zoning in order to do so. And in the case of New Canaan, I think it's very well known, but you see other similar 830G developments, very dense. In recent years, they've actually cut back on the credit for senior housing under the same affordable housing law at the state level, which I think is unfair and exacerbates the problems that we're talking about as a very good example. I also think that listen, I support the ability of municipalities, towns, and cities to make decisions for themselves on the local level. I also think there is a place for state policy to try to orient our state towards more affordability, including in the housing front. And I think that there are compromises that could be forged that would create more housing options for people, especially to age in place, to make it easier or more likely that accessory dwelling units, for instance, get built. You know, they're called in-law apartments. That might actually be that old-fashioned terminology might actually be the best for that for this today's discussion. Make it easier to build residential units in mixed-use areas so people can walk to their daily needs without going too far. You know, rather than this one-size-fits-all large cookie cutter apartment buildings, sometimes in the middle of nowhere without amenities around, certainly without families around, if you use the comparison of accessory dwelling units. So I think there's ways on housing, and housing is a big question. It's an important question. We need affordability. We need optionality. I think we can orient our housing policy to create more that has local buy-in, that meets people's daily needs in the case of being around mixed use, in the case of accessory dwelling units, without totally upending the appeal of towns and neighborhoods by changing them into something unrecognizable.
I think
Well,
you're
right.
right. I mean, it's an aha moment, but affordable accessory dwelling units, ADUs, is made to solve this problem. I mean, I don't think that if I build an ADU on my property that I'm going to find a family moving into it with school-aged children. You know, that's for a different kind of household. But I definitely think that if I built an ADU on my property, that I would be that it would line up perfectly with the needs of seniors. And as long as Russ Barksdale has got nurses who will come to the ADU and provide services, it's a great option in the continuing care, the continuum.
Ryan also hit upon the point of affordability and getting credits, right? So for seniors, we get, and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, we only get a half a credit for each unit. And I think why shouldn't it be one for one? If we are keeping seniors in our community and we are making it affordable for them to stay in the community, why shouldn't that credit, that token, if you will, be an equal token, since those seniors are the ones that pay taxes and built the schools and built the program and infrastructure, now to somehow degrade, if you will, their value in terms of their weight, I think is a disservice to the seniors that want to stay within our area. So I would, from a policy standpoint, I think that is one area, as well as John indicated, Ryan will be used to the in-law suite soon. But it is an option that other communities have done extraordinarily well in terms of building affordable, so that it's not all congregated in one location.
Yeah, I mean, I'm watching the roll-on effect of this. This is just like an aha moment for me. But if you change the policy to give him 1-for-1 credits, then all of the sudden, people start to look for the ADU I built in my backyard. And I'm going to tell you that even in wealthy New Canaan or Greenwich, you're going to find ADUs renting for $1,500, $2,000 instead of the more typical $5,000 price point that we're seeing the old Avalon units are renting for. So you're going to see it solves the affordable housing problem, and it makes sure that the seniors stay in the community. And who are the volunteers in our community? It's the seniors. So we can't just be a single dynamic community where we provide great schools and we attract school age families into this community. We have got to have a strategy for retaining our seniors. And I think the ADUs are part of it. And those credits that Russell talks about, it should be the first step in providing that solution. Roberto, where are you going when you retire? Are you moving out of the area? You staying in New York City? Are you coming to Connecticut because we cost less? You're on mute.
I'm going to Waveny.
You're going to Waveny.
It's a no-brainer. We'll come to you, Roberto. Either way.
Appreciate it.
No, seriously, Roberto. Are there Wavenys around you that you think about? Oh, this is where I'm going to put my parents. This is where I'm going to go.
I think these are all financially dependent questions, right? What sort of nest egg do you have? How have you built up? Where is my daughter, for example? Just like Ryan was saying, and people are clustering towards where their children are. That was Russell who actually said that. Where's my daughter going to be? Is she going to be in California? Maybe we leave and we go to California. Is she going to be in Florida? I don't know. But here it's expensive, and depending upon what our needs are and how our health is. And, there's a lot of old people who stay here because they feel like the services are very close, because you literally can walk from here to there and you can get around very easily. At the same time, there is a point at which walking becomes difficult. Or if you're in a less expensive apartment, it might be on the second floor, third floor with no elevator. That becomes problematic. People who live in a duplex, I help buyers all the time. And, if someone's in their 50s, 60s, and they're thinking we're going to age into this and it's a duplex, I bring up, you have to think about, you're fine now, but the moment your knee goes out, that's problematic. So there's so many concerns around that. And, everything's about affordability. And what I'm just curious about with the supply still is it's a supply demand situation still. And if you can't afford the care, you're really in trouble. And I'm curious, what is the difference in cost between, let's just say I was being cared at home or I was being cared in a facility? Is it let's say being cared in a facility is one, being cared at home is half that, more than that? Like, what's the formula roughly on that?
Well, that's a great question. I'm old enough to just celebrate my 40th year in healthcare, and up until about 10 years ago, it was always cheaper to be able to provide the care in your home than it was to be in a congregate setting when you get to that standpoint. Now it is flipped, because that one nurse is really driving the cost, and the one nurse now can take care of 20 people or 15 people in one congregate setting, and maybe due to the traffic on the Merritt, they can only now take care of 4 or 5 because of the commute time in between people's homes has been increased dramatically. So that cost ratio has really flipped over the last 5 years. And we found, when we have caregivers, we look at pockets of regions. So if we have 20 patients that are in the north side of Greenwich, then we will have one or a pocket of caregivers that'll just take care of that one region, so they don't have to get on any major highways. But you're absolutely right, Roberto. I mean, you got to look at what the supply and demand is for each of those sub pockets. It used to be that, you could have nurses covering all of Fairfield County, but because of the infrastructure and because of the commute times and things of that nature, you now have to break even the county up into these small sectors. No different than New York and looking at all of the suburbs that you have and the submarkets that you have there. So it's a great question, and that's how we're trying to address it. Also, telemedicine from a federal standpoint is not being reimbursed as well. And when we started telemedicine, we were preventing, at that time about 12 people from going to the hospital because you could catch it early. If they're on medicine, they'd stop taking their meds and their blood pressure, or they had that big Chinese meal and they have congestive heart failure. All of a sudden they start retaining water and fluid. You can catch it early and change their med, be on top of it as compared to that individual having to go to the emergency room. So that's where the technology can play a huge factor. But with all of this, it takes a little bit of support from the federal government, especially on the Medicare side, to develop the policies to be able to support it for providers like us to do it effectively. The second thing I would say is that no matter how wealthy you are, and we've seen this, and you, Roberto, I'm sure you have friends that have gone through this. I know John and I have, where no matter how much you retire with, it may not be enough. People retire at 65, 70 thinking, oh, I've got enough to get to 85. Well, they're living to 90, 95 years of age, and we have very wealthy, affluent people who have outlived their nest egg, and it takes that safety net. It takes, we're talking about private equity investment and things of that nature. The most calls that we receive in any point in time is someone that is at a private equity firm, and I love private equity, don't get me wrong, but they're at a private equity where they say you're out of funds, you need to make a call and you need to relocate. And we carry that charity care burden as a nonprofit, and it becomes tougher and tougher as all of these other providers go away, and we get a higher demand for our limited services that we can provide.
Ryan, we just heard Russell loves private equity. Can
I
you
do.
talk to me about these bills, Senate Bill 1332, Senate Bill 1507, 469, 261, which are in response to, as Russell points out, when they come in unchecked and they buy these nursing homes, they load them up with debt, then they make decisions that decrease the amount of care and sometimes just put them into bankruptcy and move on. Um, on the other hand, we've had nursing homes on this show at the other end of Connecticut owned by mom and pop. And I could see that mom and pop are running a care facility and the people who live there love that facility. But I could see if the roof starts to age and the infrastructure starts to age and becomes too much for a couple running a private nursing home, I could see that they would look to private equity, corporate America, and say, we need more investment. We need to expand. We need to invest in the infrastructure and the physical plant in order to keep up. So by sponsoring a bunch of bills that say investment is the bad guy, when we clearly need investment, I could see some people saying, wait a minute, this is not the way to go. So what is this approach and why is it the way to go?
Listen, I am confident that I wasn't the co-sponsor or supporter of any of those bills, because we do need investment in these facilities and in this industry in order for it to grow. And I think it's a little bit ironic that people who are presiding over policies in the state that continue to reduce supply, reduce access, and increase costs, want to cast stones at private actors. There are bad private actors. There are, in every industry and in every area. And I could even submit to you that in private equity, there's more bad actors than in other areas of the economy. But it's for policy to encourage competition and investment in order to increase access and choice. And the best actors, if the policies are right, will succeed, and there will be more choice and accessibility. And there are so many obvious ways to improve affordability and access in healthcare in particular in Connecticut that we continued to fail to undertake, including improving the certificate of need laws, including bringing in more workers, licensed workers to the state to work here and provide care, including to lower costs for those workers and so on. That why are those policymakers kind of casting blame at others rather than examining the own mistakes that they continue to make, is a question, a riddle that continues to go unanswered. And I think those reforms should be priority one on day one of any legislative session. And it's been very frustrating for me. Every single year I've been in the Senate the last 4 years, I've made those proposals, and they continue to fall on deaf ears, even though there's a few Democrats, and I'm a Republican, who do support those measures. So it's something I'll continue to work to build a coalition on. But I continue to be baffled that the people in charge, maybe it's an old political trick, so I shouldn't be so surprised, but they continue to, cast aspersions on private players rather than examine the policies that they presided over for many years.
I'll give you one quick example, and Ryan is correct. If you set the right policy for a private equity firm to come in and run a healthcare facility, let's just use staffing as an example. If you come in and the policy is that, yes, you're going to get reimbursed better if you staff better. If the number of RN hours to patients is higher, you're going to get that reimbursement. Then you can incentivize private equity firms to do that, as compared to coming in and say, a private equity firm looking, we don't need as many nurses that we do. We're just going to double down on the load that the nurses are taking, and we're going to take that additional income off the table. You can incentivize through policy ways for private equity to be able to come in, as long as the rules are set in such a way that you're getting that higher increase in quality of care that you're looking for, as compared to making it just a pure financial grab.
Part of the problem is that we don't know that this is a problem. I don't see it as a major policy initiative on any of the candidates' web pages. I have a question here that says, are seniors becoming more vocal advocates in local politics, given their growing numbers? Are they asking for this? Are they asking Hartford, for help? Or are we haven't been educated, we don't know what to ask for?
I think one of the classic problems in politics and policy making is some of the best reforms and policies have diffuse benefits. They benefit everybody a little bit or marginally. Where some of the worst policies have very concentrated benefits. They benefit a few people a lot, but they cost most people a little. And most of the policy changes that we're talking about on this this video, and that we support kind of broadly, they have broad benefits, but they're incremental benefits for everybody, and they're not concentrated benefits for anybody. They might even hurt some people because it's an increasing competition, and so they might actually be concentrated costs and diffuse broad benefits on the general population. And most of the time, people don't rally support and actively advocate when there is a diffuse benefit, a broad benefit across the population. It is a very classic, well-known problem in politics and public policy. And, I hope we can climb that hill. We can overcome that obstacle of diffuse benefit. But so many of the things we're talking about make, more accessory dwelling units and making it easier to age in place, lower electric costs, lower property taxes, certificate of need reform to increase supply of provision of care, more workers, making it easier for workers from out of state in the healthcare space to come into Connecticut, diffuse benefits. But if you add them all up, they really could help make it more affordable and easier to age in place or retire here in Connecticut or any other state in the country. So I would, having been in the state Senate for 4 years, and we see some of these, really good advocates who are very well intentioned. They want a specific benefit for an area of the population that they care about, or an industry they care about, or industry they work in. But the policymakers, who are sympathetic to those arguments, they're not keeping in context what the cost could be on the general population. In politics and in policy, we have to consider the people who are working, who aren't paying attention, who are paying the price of these policies, and those add up over time.
It is always the unintended consequences, right? That no one has the macro view to be able to do that. And I think what you're going to see, Ryan, at least what I'm seeing on this side, is that growing a senior population are going to become more active. And as you know, when you have your town hall meetings and you talk about something like utility cost, whether you have a Republican, Democrat, or independent after your name, you can build consensus that we're, as a state, are paying way too much and the policies don't work. So I think as our seniors become more vocal, which they're starting to do, and they're starting to find their way into some policy seats, this should be this should be something that is common sense, but you need to look at the policies on a macro level. As you said, you have special interest groups that come in and just focus on one particular aspect, and they get the support for that, not knowing, and the policymaker not knowing what the unintended consequences may be on the entire industry.
I want a forward looking. I'm going to share screen now. In February 6, 2025, Waveny came in front of planning and zoning and asked for a major expansion. Russell, why don't you tell us about this? Why? I'm going to tell you that when I heard this proposal, I thought only 40 more bedrooms.
Well, it's only
Why
30.
not 400?
It's only 30, and we were getting to a point in time, and I think the community realized it, that only 2 of every 10 referrals that we were getting from our local community we were able to accept. And when you're at that level and you're coming out of COVID, where everyone wants a private room, they don't want to be exposed to other airborne diseases and viruses and things of that nature, and you need to bring in that technology to them bedside, that we really needed to make an investment here. And so again, if we had the space to build 60, we would easily fill 60 additional beds, but really we're landlocked. So we chose the 30 number. We'll be breaking ground in February, and it'll be filled when the ribbon cutting happens, and all of you will be invited to join us. So to Ryan's point, there's a moratorium on expanding skilled beds right now, and so we have through our continuum care are able to do that. But when you're getting to a point where only 2 out of 10 are coming, and people are calling and saying we don't have a place to go, it's becoming difficult, and it's becoming difficult for this region. And so that's why we went ahead, saw that we needed to do it, and started the planning a couple years ago, and we'll be breaking ground soon.
Ryan, moratorium doesn't square with the fact that we need beds and he'll have them all filled on day one.
Yeah, it's wild. It defies logic.
But I'm only one man.
But what's the reasoning? What's the reasoning for that?
The decades-old reasoning for having certificate of need is that because the best argument is that because public dollars go to healthcare, that limiting the expansion provides some sort of protection, maybe on the amount of spending in the entire sector. When those are dollars mostly from the federal government, that the state level justification for that policy doesn't make sense to me. If it's not a federal policy either, we've seen it. I don't know. I mean, I'm at a loss for words because it's one of the most frustrating kind of discussions I've had at the state level in the Senate because there's not a natural philosophical rationale even among even for many of my friends on the other side of the aisle who have more of a predilection for more interventionist policies, economic policies. This one doesn't make sense. It's been frustrating that it hasn't been a mantle that's been taken up. Even like there's certificate of need that makes it more difficult to reduce, facilities or services. And we can have an argument over that, but I can't even get it across the finish line to eliminate the certificate of need or roll back the certificate of need for expansion of facilities. There's certainly people who would be hurt by competition in industry, but this is rank and file, officials and regulators who refuse to make these changes and have year in and year out. And I'll continue trying. There are good people on both sides of the aisle who do see the light, I think, on it. And hopefully over time we can make progress and build a coalition. But it's not, listen, everyone in public service or in the public sphere should be willing and able to make an argument on the other side of any issue. And I can on the vast majority of issues. This one I find much more difficult to explain the rationale.
Back in the day, Roberto, and I know I'm aging myself, COPNs were to prevent 5 MRIs within 2 city blocks of each other, and that those MRIs were being paid for by the state and federal government through either Medicaid or Medicare. And so it was a way of limiting technology so that every person wouldn't go out and add an MRI on the corner, and then having physicians have ownership of it or private equity, and so that you would come in and have a hangnail and you'd be getting an MRI and you'd be driving up the cost. So that's the far extreme. The middle of the road is where Ryan is going, and I think it's the right path, is you'll have a Northwell that's now coming in and taking over the Nuvance healthcare system, and they are now slotted to, and it had to go through the OIG in New York State as well as Connecticut. They have to put $1 billion into the Nuvance healthcare system over a 5-year period of time. And imagine having that control and being restricted through a COPN process of being able to invest those monies and dollars into that infrastructure, which only brings higher quality and competition to the area, which is always great. I mean, I love competition because it allows you from a quality standpoint to shine, and that's what our focus should be always. And when you can provide the quality of care, the dollars always follows, from my perspective, in my 40 years. But that's how it started, Roberto, is this so that you couldn't have everyone couldn't go out and buy an MRI and then send the bill back to the state and federal government for that technology.
Final thoughts. We got a couple minutes left. I'm going to go around, ask you each for some forward looking, and I'll go first because I'm going to be positive. I am very hopeful. This is a problem we can solve. So I'm going to just leave you with this thought that Connecticut is in the top 10, top 12 most desired states in the country to retire to. People want to be here. Why? Safety, quality of the healthcare, quality of the community, quality of life, and even affordability relative to some of the Sunbelt options that have suddenly gotten very expensive. I don't know if you've noticed, but going down to Boca isn't as inexpensive. You pay very high property taxes on those very expensive purchases in Boca, Palm Beach, Naples. And so a lot of people are now coming back to Connecticut from the Sunbelt and saying Florida's not so affordable. Hilton Head, not so affordable. Charleston, not as affordable as it used to be. So I'm very bullish on Connecticut's prospects over the next 10 years to bring in seniors, provide them the services, solve some of these regulatory issues, and give guys like Russell the support they need? Who's next?
I'm bullish on Connecticut too. I think that there needs to be change in policy in order to achieve the potential of the state. But the state has so much working in its favor. Good people. It is pretty dense, but at the same time, it's a very beautiful state with great natural amenities, strong communities. It's relatively safe. It's got a good location. It has so much working in its favor. Yet it is too expensive. Yet it has seen mostly out migration compared to other states. That I think all can be changed with the right reforms and the right leadership and the right policy. So I am optimistic with the right policy change that it can be affordable, that it can become easier to age in place and retire here, to build a family here, to move here, to work here. The caveat is you need the right policy in place to effectuate the change on the obstacles that we talked about on this discussion.
Roberto, final thoughts?
A couple things. One is there's a huge generational transfer of wealth that's happening. Tremendous amount of money. And that money is it's just going to be out of need that money is going to have to go into the sector. The other thing is that, we're talking about attracting people as they retire to Connecticut. I think you need to attract the young people, because I think the idea of parents following their children is really relevant. That's for real. And if people, a lot of young people, they finish college and they want to go to the city. They all want to go to the city. John, your kid came to the city, right? They want an apartment in the city. If they can create opportunities in Connecticut, more opportunities that are more, somehow, I don't know what it is. I don't know the processes of that. But if they're there, they start there. There's more money there. The parents will go there. And that, and with that generational transfer of wealth, that wealth will be going to those kids, and those kids can take care of their parents as well.
Excellent point. Keeping the wealth in the state. It behooves New York, Connecticut to try and figure out a way to retain these seniors and their wealth. Russell?
Look, I thank everyone. I thank Senator Fazio. I thank Roberto and John for bringing this to a highlight, and for I think it's been a great program in developing and building consensus on some policy issues that we can all address and we can all debate. And I think they're worthy of our support. I would say from an economic boost, Roberto is absolutely right in terms of those dollars and the dollars that the transfer of wealth and the seniors. When seniors move into a community or they're allowed to age in place, you're talking about pension funds that are coming. You're talking about federal dollars that are coming into a local economy that help booster everything. You're talking about volunteerism. You're talking about philanthropy. You're talking about startup companies. You're talking about a whole ecosystem that follows that group of individual as they age in place. And if they pick Connecticut, if they pick New York, and they reach out to Roberto for that apartment so they can be near their kids because they've landed that job, or they can say, I'll visit my kids on the weekends and I'll move and retire in Connecticut or vice versa. If we can support that ecosystem in both a caregiver way, earn to learn, as well as a housing credit balance, so that affordability, their credit is equal to the affordability of a 30 and 40-year-old, and they get that 1-to-1 ratio. I think all of those policy decisions are within our control. And if we find the right message, I think we could get a consensus across the state and across the region.
Well said. That's a great final word. But I am going to thank and remind everybody where they can find you. Waveny.org. That's where you're going to find Waveny. Fazio, RyanFazio.com. That's your brand new website, and you can read his policy statements there. Good luck, Ryan Fazio.
For governor.
For governor. Waveny. All right, we've already talked about Waveny and Russ. And thank you, Roberto Cabrera. We can find your latest, I think it dropped yesterday, your latest market report at robertocabrera.com. You'll find me at theengelteam.com, and you'll find this episode added in the next half hour at boroughsandburbs.com. And with that, thank you, gentlemen. This has been great.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Really appreciate it.
I'm so glad you're here rescuing Connecticut, both of you. Connecticut is better for having the two of you guys here. So thanks for what you do. Bye.
Thank you.